Then, on the stage, I'm inviting Tom Verstappen. Tom, are you there with us? Is your mic working? What did you have for breakfast?
Let's quickly check. Yeah, it's working. I didn't have any breakfast. I had a coffee. So
Man,
just
you're
an
so
espresso and that was
hardcore.
it. Yeah.
Although I do feel like some of the students here have the same type of breakfast as
Yeah,
well.
apparently it's good, but that's a whole different topic.
Put on his Google glasses and
Yeah, so in short, your talk is going to be about XR technology.
Correct.
Probably you're explaining what that is in the talk as
Yes,
well, right?
it's my
Okay,
second
then I
slide,
don't need to
so-
update anyone. I'm going to let you delve in. I have to say, first of all, you're a researcher researching creative and innovative business.
Yes.
Is
a
that
mouthful,
exactly,
I know.
Is that exactly as it sounds like?
It's cooler than it sounds like.
Okay, luckily then. Take it away. Here's the stage.
Thank you. Let's have a look if my presentation is up and running. Thank you. First of all, obviously, thanks for having me. As soon as we get this up and running, we'll start. But I'm going to talk about XR technology. As forgot your name, really sorry. Satan told us that obviously I'm a researcher from Thomas More. I've got a background in audio post-production, and I moved to Thomas More research facilities 2 years ago, and we've been doing a research program called Extend. Maybe just a short introduction to what Extend really is. It's funded by the government, which is quite important to tell. Obviously, we have budgets to buy stuff and test it out. We also work with an advisory group, and those are all people from within the industry in Flanders. Which makes it really interesting to conduct the research. We are trying to do certain things that are obviously valuable for the industry. So we are trying to set up smaller pilots, smaller test cases with the industry together to try and find out new ways of doing stuff. If needed, I can take my own MacBook if that would help. I've got it with me. Can't see anything. Oh, it's working. Okay, brilliant. So, don't know where I need to point to. Oh, there we go. So what I want to do today, just an overview, obviously a quick talk about what XR is. I'll keep that very short, I promise. And then I want to look at a couple of things that we've been doing within the research. It's important to highlight, obviously, that everything that I'm showing today is what we've been doing inside our research. It's not just all the XR technology that is available. It's just a selection of things that we've been doing, things that are moving, things that are interesting. So that's important to take away. But we'll talk about face capturing and motion capturing. There has been a lot of change in that area. So it's quite interesting to see how things got more affordable. And that is important to mention as well. Within our research project, we are trying to find out if we can implement XR technology within broadcast. That is the main research question that we've been looking into for the past 2 years for a number of reasons. How can we, for instance, amplify the experience for someone who's watching telly, but also how can we make things more easy, more cheap? So there's a couple of ways that we're looking into. We'll look at virtual production is something that we really believe is going to be a big change in TV and broadcast in general. I'll try and highlight how it works roughly and what the capabilities are of virtual production. We'll look at something called 2D Character Animator, which is by Adobe. It's a really interesting bit of software, very easy to use. Then we'll look at Photogrammetry, again, a very interesting, accessible technology that you basically have inside of your pocket. We did a test case with Ollie Wannabe. It's a monkey from Belgium. It's probably not known here. He's slightly rude, very interesting character, and we did something with him. I'll show you later on. Then we'll look at the combination of motion capture with photogrammetry models, and then the last two are volumetric captures, and to close, an AR avatar and using something called Plask, and I'll show that later on what that is. So what is XR? As I promised, I'll keep it very short. XR is basically an umbrella term, meaning that, for instance, MR, mixed reality, AR, augmented reality, and VR, virtual reality, all sort of fall under XR, and it stands for extended reality. You see a couple of words on the screen, for instance, the virtual production, LED walls, virtual worlds, green key, camera tracking, 2D character animation. Those are all things that we consider to be XR technology. There's plenty more out there. This is just a selection of things that we've been working on with our research project. First thing, as I mentioned, I want to talk about is the face and motion capture. It's something that we see that there's been a lot of evolution in. Nowadays, you can just use your iPhone, for instance. The front-facing camera, which is a true depth camera, allows you to measure any movement in your face, and you can send that data straight away to a computer, and you can animate a face with it. It's really cool, and it has really evolved from when we started 2 years ago, where the model was still quite buggy and it didn't really work, up until where you can actually use it in live environments, which is really crazy. And it's literally free, so you just have to download the app, install Unreal Engine, MetaHuman, and you just can work with it. I've just posted a couple of things on the screen here. On the left-hand side, you can see what 2 years of research does to your hair, but that's basically using the app. So you can see that there's a mesh on my face, and it's all the live data points that it's tracking. It uses infrared beams, and it points it on my face, and the beams go back to the camera, and by doing that, it can measure out what's happening on your face. We use that in conjunction with what you can see on the bottom, which is called MetaHuman. It's a fairly new, I think it was released in April last year. It's a cloud-based plugin, which is free. Again, that's really crazy. And you can basically sculpt faces. You download that face that you've made. We've tried making our own, which is not as easy yet. They're still working on it. But you can then use what you can see on the left-hand side, that data, you can then use that to start animating a real face. And it's really extraordinary. It's moving quite fast. We, as you can see on the right-hand side, that's the earliest pilot that we did, and that was with a previous version. The quality difference was really big, and all of a sudden they released this thing called MetaHuman, and again it was pushed forward quite a lot. And that's something that you'll see. The XR industry is ever evolving. There's new things coming out left, right, and center, so it's really, really interesting at the moment. Another thing that you can see, and I'll just go back so it starts playing again, hopefully. Yes. On the top right of your screen, you can see the use of Adobe Character Animator, and it's something that's really interesting as well. It's part of the Adobe Cloud suite, so you can normally, if you are part of it, you can just download it straight away. And it's a real simple tool to start animating 2D, and we call it 2.5D, which obviously means that you can draw a figure, and if you draw like sides of the face as well, it sort of looks like a little bit of 3D. It's not, obviously. But what we did there, we had the idea of doing a test pilot to do a children's program presentation. We have in Belgium something called Catnet, which is a broadcaster for children. And the idea was, how can we do a program presentation but do it live? So on the right-hand side, you can see the presenter, and on the left-hand side, obviously our character, but it was done there and then. It was live. There was no post-production involved with it. It was all done there and there. How did we do it? There was an adjacent room, and we had a girl sitting there, and she was talking straight into a computer using the webcam. That was it. And that allowed us to animate the character that you see on the left-hand side. At that point, there was no means to move the body. There's been an update where you can do that now as well. But we basically had a script where we identified some key emotions that we wanted to show the viewers, sad, angry, that kind of stuff. And we used a simple MIDI keyboard, and you can just tell this button is going to be the happy face, this button is going to be the sad face. And while you are doing it, you can just trigger those emotions using that MIDI keyboard. In the middle, you can see how we set it up, basically. We were using an external webcam for test purposes, but we found out there's no difference between a camera or a webcam. It's all doing the same thing, but it's basically tracking your face, and now there's been an update. It also tracks your body. So if you stand in front of the webcam and you move around, your character will do the same thing. So you see there's been a lot of movement in the area. One of the things that we've also been doing, and I think the next slide will show that, is obviously playing around with motion capture. There we go. Obviously, someone had to be the guinea pig. We bought a Rococo suit, and guess who that guinea pig was? Obviously me. Again, a lot more hair, so 2 years of research. But as you see, we make a lot of fun. It's quite exciting to have that suit. It allows you to use motion capture data in real time, excuse me. But one of the issues that we found is that there's still quite a lot of cleanup that needs to be done to the data. So it's not yet there. We can just put on the suit and do it live. This suit is meant to be used for productions where you obviously can clean up that motion capture data. But we are seeing movements. There's been a new suit released quite recently. and we see that that is improving a lot. So we think that we are slowly evolving to a place where we can actually use a suit and use that live. Obviously, the benefits are that you can make television with an animated character. Normally, that costs a lot of money, but we are really moving away from that. Then I want to talk about virtual production. Maybe that should be like the biggest takeaway of today's session, or my session. We really believe that that's going to be the big game changer within broadcast, and we are already seeing that is happening. For instance, in America, a show like The Mandalorian, you probably have heard of it, might have seen it. That's been done using virtual production. Now, what is virtual production? It's quite easy. You basically track your camera. So you can see there's cameras in the back. What we then do is we place a tracker on the camera, and that allows us to have all the positional data of the camera. We call it XYZ data, whatever, but it means that if I move around my camera, the engine will know where it's moving to. So we send that data package to an engine, and we call it Unreal Engine, which is a gaming engine, and you can use that to create virtual worlds, but also augmented reality elements that you can place inside. And it's really cool how fast this is moving. Obviously, by just telling it, it's quite boring, but I'll actually show it. The big advantages are that you can shoot in a quite small studio, and you have literally control over anything. Time of day, something that might not fit your shot that you want to make, you can just move it out of the way. And obviously this has been accelerated by the COVID pandemic, where it wasn't possible to fly out an entire crew to Iceland and then move to wherever. But also filming in golden hour, for instance, which is a very narrow time frame. Using this type of technology, you can see we just shifted from daytime to nighttime. You have virtually unlimited access to certain things that you would want on set. You can see that this is very expensive, obviously. This is using a LED volume, so LED panels all around, and that causes the lighting to be perfect. So for instance, if I would be standing there, the light that reflects on me is perfect. There are abbreviations of this type of technology where you use a green key, and that's what we've been using to try and experiment. You can see they are moving the light on set, so there's no big, how do you say it, sort of graphic department involved to start moving it. They can do it quite quickly on set. Once the virtual surrounding has been built in Unreal Engine, it's really easy to do it in real time. So obviously we want to do the same thing, but don't have the same budgets. What we first started to do, or what we wanted to do, was to try and get an idea of what it meant to use virtual production, obviously with a very different budget. So we basically misused a Vive tracking VR headset, and you can use the remote controller, and you can see one of my developers has built a 3D mold to put on the camera. And what that is doing is basically telling us if there's any movement in the camera, where the camera is moving to. With that Vive system, you get two base stations. You basically place them on two opposite sides of the room, and any movement from our remote between those two base stations will be noticed and will be sent to our machine. You can see that in this clip. It's a very short one. This is all very low cost, and there's obviously issues that we encountered. But for us, as I can show in the next slide, this is actually it working on set. The big difference is, yeah, there we go. You have real-time input. You can see what you are doing. We can send a feed back into the camera, so even the cameraman is seeing exactly what you can see on the screen. You can also notice, obviously, there's some jittery, so the camera is moving a bit. That's all to do with the fact that we are using something that isn't really meant for that. So moving on from that, we decided to buy a little bit more of an expensive system, but even in broadcast terms, it's about 1/25 of the price of a normal, fully fledged camera tracking system. So we moved into this system. There we go. So what you can see is some green mats on the floor, and that's basically a pattern. So there's a couple of lights that you can see, and our little tracking device is basically an eye that looks at this sort of pattern on the floor, and it has an accelerometer inside it, so meaning that any movement that is done will be translated to data. And you can basically simply put that little device on your camera. meaning that any movement obviously from the camera, all the XYZ positioning will be sent through to our computer using obviously an Unreal Engine. But this is quite a big step for us. Obviously, we are moving from a very inefficient system to something that has really been built dedicated for virtual production. So what you see on the left-hand side, it's quite a fun project, and you can see we work very hard, but we have a lot of fun as well. We had a friend of ours, DJ YOLO Tank. You might have heard from him. He's quite crazy, makes really crazy music, and we basically approached him and told him, look, we've got this system, and we want to try it out in a live environment. So we want to do a live DJ set for 20 minutes. Are you interested? And obviously the answer was yes. What happened, we had a couple of students and we just told them that, look, this is the contact details of DJ YOLO Tanker, just reach out to him and he'll tell you what he wants. Students had to learn how to work with Unreal Engine, which to my surprising was quite quick. They really got the hang of it in a couple of weeks. And as you can see, it's a very weird environment, but that's all down to our client, DJ YOLO Tanker, wanting very weird things put together, from a Teletubby to some animals with some hats on them, so it's quite a strange atmosphere. And obviously, if we're honest, the quality is not broadcast quality. We obviously understand that, but for us as research, it was really interesting to see that we could actually build a system where we can do these things live. This is all running live, there's no post-production been done, so that's quite interesting for us. You can see the world here when we were shooting. Interestingly, we had 2 cameras, that's it. So you had one fixed camera for all the close-ups, and you'll probably see a close-up in a bit. This is the close-up, and then we had one camera, which you could see on the left-hand side of the screen, on a crane. But we can use virtual camera movements. That's the big advancement with using virtual production. We can use virtual camera movements on top of a fixed camera, for instance. So you can see all of this movement is basically the camera on the crane moving around and choosing a virtual perspective within that world that we built. So you can move around and really shoot from a virtual standpoint, not just using multiple cameras, just using one single camera for that. Enough of the mayhem. We then obviously wanted to do something that is more towards broadcast quality, but obviously we are not making ourselves any illusions. Our team is very small, so we simply do not have the budgets or the manpower to build these quite extensive environments. What I can see here is that they built a sort of arena type thing, and the big difference here is that we worked with one fixed camera and just used the virtual camera motion. So it's literally just a camera that is standing still, and all the movement comes from this virtual camera. And this time we explored the use of a DMX protocol. That might not say anything, but the man behind the lights will be using DMX probably. It's basically a protocol that's used in stages with lights, and you can basically say, I want this light to color green and then move to blue, and I want it to turn around, and whatever, we want to use pyro. That's exactly what we've been using here, as you can see. There is light moving around. It was just a laptop that was using that DMX protocol to start moving those virtual lights and to start triggering pyro and stuff like that. What you can do is you can link those 2 things together and actually place lights in the actual set that are linked to our virtual world, meaning that if a light moves, we could have that light reflect on the face as well, so you can see there's so much things that can be done with it. Then virtual production used for AR elements. As I mentioned, you can use the same tracking system on a camera to place augmented reality inside television as well. And you can do that live. And again, that is really cool. It's something that has been moving, and basically the system that we have is very mobile, so we can just take it with us. And that meant that we could, and as you see, this is just a test that we did. We are moving around with the camera. The camera work is not really brilliant. But you can see that this object is just staying where we've decided it needs to be. And we are moving around the camera. And again, you can see the tracking mats. We've got a tracker on top of our camera, and we're just moving around over those green mats. And you can place augmented elements wherever you want. We did a bigger pilot together with Sputnik, which is a Belgian production company, and we used this technology to have a illumination screen inside our normal screen. And I know it probably doesn't look like a very big thing, but for us it was really important to try and get this working. We did this on location. We went to the Natural History Museum in Brussels, and we took the entire system with us, placed it there, and we were able to shoot this on set. We didn't have to do any post-production afterwards, so that means that there's a big shift in budget. You don't need to put as much money into post-production. You can do that in pre-production phase, where people already start to feel how this show's going to end up like. So we built the system in Unreal Engine. This is not really very enjoyable to watch, but basically this was them building the system. We could basically say it to flip around, whatever we want to. And then we brought this into our TV show, and you can actually see it being used. Yeah, there we go. Oh, sorry, too quick. Not really working, the machine. I think the computer's having a bit of trouble. One back. You could go to, yeah, there we go. I don't know if it's going to play now. It's not really liking that. Okay, we'll just look at this. This is basically the same thing. So what you can see is that we built an augmented reality avatar. Hopefully it will show it. And again, we did the same thing. So we placed it in the actual environment. We tracked our camera, so any movement that was done with the camera, that translated to our AR avatar being fixed in position. One of the biggest advantages as well is that you can see this in camera as well. So we took a feed from our computer that was basically rendering out this image. We fed that back into the camera and also to a separate screen. Oh, it's running crazy. And that allowed us for the cameraman to actually see what he was filming, but also the participants, they had a screen that was just slightly off what you can see here, and they could actually see it in real time, meaning that their interaction on set is very different. If you have to tell them, oh, there's going to be some kind of dinosaur there and you have to be surprised, it's a very different thing to actually seeing it. I think we're having a bit of issue with showing that clip, unfortunately. Try it one more time. It's not liking it. Okay, we'll move on from that. The next thing I already sort of briefly talked about is a 2D character animator. I think it's a very underrated bit of software that really has shown its merit in the past. We've been using it for various different pilots. We gave an assignment to students of ours, make a 1-minute explainer video, and they had to choose whatever subject they wanted. It could be about Shakespeare, it could be about Frida Kahlo, whatever. They were free to choose that, and they had to basically do everything. So they had to design the character. You can see some of the designs here on paper. Once they did that, they had to move it into Illustrator or Photoshop and start drawing it there. They had to build out storyboards, obviously to know what they were going to try and make. They had to design the backdrops and stuff as well. And it was, I think, a process of about 5 weeks, roughly, from giving them the assignment to finishing it. So it's quite extraordinary how quickly they were able to deliver it. And you can see the end results here. Obviously, this is in a particular style, but you can push that even further. You can go to, as I said, 2.5D, so you can really push it further than you'd like. But this is just made by students. There's no big technical side to it. It's literally just opening up your laptop, designing something, and using the webcam to start animating it, which is quite remarkable. So for content production, this is really interesting. You can use it live, as I showed earlier. And we then decided to obviously take this to a different level. We have this person called Ollie Wannabe, the slightly rude monkey from Belgium. And I asked an illustrator friend of mine to draw him, and obviously you can see that we had several poses of the head drawn as well, and several mouth movements drawn. And we then took it into Adobe Character Animator, and what you'll see next is basically my colleague just standing in front of his webcam. It's just a regular computer, nothing weird. And you're able to, it's a shame that you can't fully see it with the lamp there, but you can see my colleague just moving around, moving his face, and it translates directly to our character that we've made. Obviously, if we're critical, you can see that this part should have been colored in a little bit more, but again, research purpose, it was absolutely fine for us. You can see it's quite easy, and I highly recommend just downloading it and playing around with it. It's so easy to use. Then the next thing is photogrammetry. It's something that is really, really cool, very easy to use again. There's not a huge amount of technical knowledge that you need in order to use it. Now, what is it, or what do you need to do? We are basically going to take pictures of an object. So for instance, if I want to make a photogrammetry model of the chair, that's perfectly possible. We just put it inside of a circle pretty much, and we place light boxes around it. We found out that using 3 in this setup works really well, but you can do 4, 5, whatever you want, whatever you have available basically. Place the object inside of it, and then we just take pictures around the object. So you can do it at different heights, so about 3 laps around the object, or you can just walk around and take a video of it. So it's really easy. You can just use your iPhone or whatever, and you can see our test setups here. So on the left-hand side, that's the first test that we did, and it immediately worked. Normally, nothing works from the first time you try it, but in this case it did. And on the right-hand side, we then tried out using an extra light and something called the void, which is just a black box, but we didn't find any big improvements from what we were doing. We also didn't find huge improvements in using different types of cameras. It's all pretty much the same thing. And you can see in this clip, we ingest all of those pictures into something called Reality Capture, which is a bit of software. It's free to use. And you can see the 3D model is just based on the photographs that we took. It basically looks at where certain markings match, and then we'll start building that 3D character from it. As you can see, there's still some surroundings in there, so you can see the light boxes and stuff like that, but you can just erase that. So we've managed to get rid of that. The next slide, and I'm really sorry, it's a GIF, so it's quite a low quality, but we wanted to try and explore if it's possible to start rigging it, so meaning if we can put a skeleton to it, so we can start using motion capture data and that kind of stuff. And we were able in this test to just move the neck, which for us meant that we could actually move forward with this test and see if we can push it even further. Bringing us again to our slightly rude monkey friend, Ollie Wannabe, and we decided to go to, they were basically recording stuff with him, so we had, I think, about 45 minutes as a lunch break from them to start making pictures. And I'm sorry for the graphic content that is going to come next. We had to pull the ape apart, which for us meant that we could go into a little bit more detail, and I think we did the head, the body, and then the arms separately, and we had to join them in the software that we're using. Again, this was very quick. We did it in 45 minutes, so it just showcases that it is possible to use very easy equipment. I'm just using my iPhone. Obviously, we have the lights with us, but if you have a well-lit room, that would work similarly. The next step for us was obviously to join everything together and then to start rigging it. The rigging part is quite difficult. Our developer was really complaining about it not being as easy as he would have liked. But you basically have to ingest all these sort of bones and turning points that our body has. So it takes quite a lot of time and knowledge. So this part is not really easy. But still, we managed to do it quite quickly. This is just the Ollie Wannabe in a 3D environment. It's not really the most interesting slide. Obviously, we've now built our 3D model. We've put a rig inside it so we can actually start animating it. We looked into using motion capture data. As I mentioned earlier, we had bought this suit, and you can see my colleague Dries wearing the suit. It's always funny when one wears that suit. And this, again, is real time. So he's just moving around, and we can animate the Ollie Wannabe as we speak. You can obviously see that there's still an issue with the arm slightly going through his belly, but that's all down to refinement. So if you play around with it a little bit more, you can actually get rid of those issues. Another thing that you can do if obviously you don't have a suit available is use motion capture data that you can find online, and a good place to look is the Mixamo. It's basically a library filled with motion captures, and you can just download that and bring that onto whatever you've made. So we've done that, and that's what you get basically, which is quite fun. And again, if you look at line extensions, for instance, for a TV show, this could be really interesting. You could build an app around it, whatever you want to do. But this is really an interesting thing to explore. We took this into AR again. We used the Adobe Aero app. You might have heard of it. This allows us to basically make something, upload it in there, and you can just place it anywhere you'd like. It takes a little bit of time. You can resize it, whatever you want. Once you're happy with it, you can just tap on it and we'll start playing. And if we're honest, obviously you can see that the quality is not broadcast worthy at this point, but for us it's more to do with showcasing that it's really easy to start using these technologies. In an ideal world, you use a setup that has about 100 to 200 DSLR cameras placed around an object, and they make a picture at the exact same time, meaning that if there's any slight movement of our object, we don't have an issue with that. And that's what you can see here still. There are a couple of areas that the computer didn't really figure out how to model it properly. We are looking into this. This might actually come to Thomas More soon. But it's a very costly affair. I think it's about 150K to build something like that. So it's not really that affordable. Then volumetric capture, which sort of looks similar, but we are using different technology for it. We have a Azure Kinect camera, which is sort of a depth sensing camera, and what we do is just place an object on a turntable, and then we use the camera to basically map the entire object that we are using in this case and make that into 3D. That again opens up a whole thing of, for instance, using that chair. We put it on a turntable, we scan it into 3D, and you can start using that object in AR, in virtual production. You can see there's a crossover in all of these areas. And then last thing that I want to show is the use of AR avatars and something called Plask, and that is really interesting again. It's a very cheap way of getting animations. So obviously first you have to design your AR avatar. We did a kids TV program, as I mentioned earlier. So we made it's basically about two teams that have to try and find out who's the hacker, so who's basically causing all sorts of issues in an arena. In this case, we went to the Natural History Museum in Brussels. And we decided to make something that looked similar to this. You can see the end result on the left-hand side. Now what we did, or what the idea was behind it, we want to try and have this character appear at certain points in the TV program. Obviously using it as an AR thing that you can show on an iPad or in camera. So there were various different things that we wanted to try, but the first and the most important thing to overcome was basically how can we turn flat images, 2D images that we made from a camera, how can we turn that into something that we can use as motion capture data? There's a bit of software called Plask, I think it's plask.io, that you can use, and what it does is it looks at regular TV footage, so regular images that you make on an iPhone or whatever you have, and it basically captures the motion data. So all the movement that you do, it will capture that, and it will make that into a file that you could then use to, for instance, put on an avatar like we did here. And you can see the side-by-side comparison if it starts playing. This is just without any cleanup, one-to-one using Plask.io, and you can see there's obviously a little bit of delay, but you can see that it's just extracting any motion from our normal footage and ingesting that into our avatar. We chose, and I hope this plays. It's probably a bit too heavy, the files. You can basically see that we're holding an iPad and we're using that footage that we made, and just with the Adobe Aero app, we're using it to display a message from our AR hacker. It's a shame that we can't actually show it. Let's try again. It's not liking those images, unfortunately. Yeah, my apologies. Yeah, I just can't buffer it, yeah. But yeah, that basically concludes my, my talk. I'll try and move on to the next slide. But just what I want to end with is that these things are ever evolving. Things I've shown now have already evolved. There's various different ways of using that virtual production. Things are making it easier to use that, and I think that is the main thing. If you're interested in one of these things, just have a look at it. There's so much stuff online. That's basically how we do our research, is trying to find out how you can use certain things. I think that's the main thing. Just be curious, try and find stuff online. And there's various different ways in creating content nowadays. You don't have to have a very expensive studio to do these things nowadays. It's just all down to having a laptop and just working with it. The final slide should be my email address. I don't know if we can jump to that. If there are any questions or you want to see a demo at Thomas More in Mechelen, just send me an email and we can definitely look to set something up. Thank you.
Well, that was interesting. I think that's if this is the future, we make the new avatar soon. No,
I'm gonna be as tall as you are on my avatar. Just
I'll sit down.
Q&A wise.
Yes.
Are we allowed to ask anything?
Yes. Go for it. I hope I can find an answer to it.
Yeah. Well, does with new forms of immersive media, does that also mean new forms of monetizing that media?
Not directly monetizing, but I think it all has to do with trying to find line extensions. That's something that I mentioned a couple of times. So with the pilot that we've done with Sputnik, we did it at the Natural History Museum. They were quite hesitant to allow us in because it cost like 30,000 euros to hire it for a day. They were very kind to not ask that price, but they were very hesitant in allowing us in. But at the end of the day, they saw that it's possible to make line extensions on this. So you can actually draw more visitors if this would be broadcasted, which we hope. You could have small installments inside the Natural History Museum where people can actually play certain things that we made. So there's monetization, not directly as using different type of ad strategies and that kind of stuff, but it's more to do with, as a production company, finding line extensions, finding life for whatever you've made.
Yeah. Wonderful museum, by the way, as well.
It's crazy, yeah.
will we walk around with Google Glasses on our faces in the next 10 years and then imagining a complete new world? The metaverse in real life?
I think it's not going to be what we think it will be, as in, I think it's more going to be augmented reality, where my glasses will give me information about how long my travel back would be, what my current heart rate is, all of that kind of stuff, and it will, as AR says, it will augment my reality. I think we will move into that. If the whole metaverse thing is something that will be part of our daily lives and as intensive as it's been sort of portrayed nowadays, I don't think so. And there has to be a lot of technical advances in order to get there.
Yeah.
VR headsets are not capable of doing that at this point in time. The resolution is not there yet. We need to have eye tracking, where you can basically direct processing power to what we are seeing, to our field of view. But we've moved away from having a desktop attached to a VR glasses. It's all mobile now, so there's a lot that needs to be done. But obviously, Apple being the company they are, I really strongly believe that they will sort of push that whole industry forward.
Feels like everyone is waiting for. Like Google tried the Google Glass, didn't work out. Now we're all waiting for Apple to drop those Apple glasses, so it can like finally be a working product that doesn't need Android updates.
But even then, I think it's still not going to be what we think it is. It will take many years, many technical advances for us to get there.
Yeah. Audience questions. What is there? I also have like a little thing. You were very comprehensive, by the way. And if there's none, also just with an eye on the time, we can sort of start rounding up. You have a final question, maybe?
No, not necessarily.
Okay, well, I have a tiny one, because I can imagine there's people sitting here in the audience with us today that might have an idea for something that is like a form of immersive storytelling, and they have no clue where to start with it, if they should like hire someone or find another person or do it themselves. What would you recommend for someone with any idea in this field of expertise?
I mean, especially from our last project that we did was, obviously we opened up to a broadcast company, production company, with the intent to produce a kids program that would be possible to be broadcasted. The technology that we used is nearly there to be broadcast worthy. There's stuff that is not really there yet, so that's important to keep in mind, that from a research point of view, it's very interesting to play around with these things, but it's really important to have technology that is capable of working on set. You can't have delays, because that just means that you run over budget and stuff like that. So it's important to keep that in the back of your mind, and what I'm trying to say is that not necessarily aiming for the newest technology in that case is going to be a good idea. Using XR technology that has been proven to work really well is probably a good way to start with, and then try and get partners involved that know a lot about these technologies. Is really important.
But I was asking, like, very practically, like, do I just search up tutorials on YouTube? Is that how you learn?
Pretty much. We have a website as well where you can find sort of reports on how we've approached certain things. But yeah, definitely find out on YouTube. That's what we've been doing the last 2 years, just scouring the internet for information, but also talking to people in the industry. That's really important. There are places, for instance, the AED studios in Belgium, they are already heavily invested in virtual production. So these kind of things partners are the way to go, definitely.
Matthias, do you feel like you could cost me a new VR job?
Oh, maybe.
Luckily, then we'll be thinking of you when we look up the YouTube tutorials. Big round of applause, please.
Thank you.